Well. Arsenal have beaten Chelsea by 2 goals to nil in the Women's Super League. Not a result that many people saw coming. Nobody I spoke to ahead of kick-off at Stamford Bridge or on my way down to West London saw Arsenal winning by 2 goals to nil. But that, Daisy, is sort of the conundrum, if you like, of this Arsenal side. Is it bittersweet? Is that the wrong word? I know you've beaten Chelsea 2-0. You're going to be enjoying that as fans, but after the week Arsenal have had losing to Manchester United, they've struggled this season to really find fluency. We talked last week about, we know Arsenal can deliver a perfect performance. They just haven't done it enough, but that was a nice little reminder of that ability is still there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's funny that we had this discussion on the podcast last week because I think this summarizes it perfectly. We've always said Renee Slegers Arsenal can turn it on at any point. We talked about the Champions League final, how well we performed that day, and how do we get back to that level? And then we go and perform quite similar to that level against Chelsea. But I did say last week on the podcast when we played Chelsea at the Emirates, I thought it was one of our most positive performances. I thought that Chelsea were a side that looked beatable. And I thought even looking at their game against Manchester City, which they won, obviously to get to the Subway Cup final, they still at times, City didn't take their chances, and definitely that could have been a different result. So if you look at Chelsea in some way potentially underperforming, a lot of fans on their side as well, sort of getting to
Mm.
the point where we've been at points this season where you start to think what's working and what's not. Do we trust our manager? And to get them to that point, it's crazy because we don't think we would have expected it. But yeah, Arsenal turned it on. It was a fantastic day. So many positives. I don't want to go so negative from the start. The atmosphere, the away day, the celebrations, the performance. And then I guess the other side of that is, of course, how do we make that consistent? I wrote a little piece about it. How do we kind of make that happen over a period of time? Because that is how how you go and win titles. It might work for competitions like the Champions League or some knockout competitions, but you've got to be consistent if you do want to challenge for the likes of the WSL, which we've seen from Manchester City a lot this season.
So Renee Slegers quotes, when the moment is there for this team, when it really, really, really has to happen, they do it every single time. It is the double-edged sword. Is that actually it's hard to disagree with that, but in that case, why isn't the moment where it really has to happen not every single week, but like, a League Cup semi-final in a season where you're probably not going to win the WSL, that's the sort of time where it really has to happen. There've been other times this season, Bayern Munich away where you're 2-0 up and you win that game, you don't have this game against Leuven. It is just it sort of confirms what we're thinking. Actually, the mentality is there, but it's just not been there enough.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's such a difficult mentality to get is to be able to do it over a consistent period of time. I think that, you kind of want a manager and you can't really, like you say, you can't criticize it because you want a manager and you want players who can perform on the biggest stage. If it was the other way around and we were sort of beating the likes of London City or West Ham or playing those games in the FA Cup against sort of the less difficult opponents and then going and sort of winning the Champions League matches and the knockouts and the big games and the derbies, you would be looking at that as a problem as well. But it's how do you get both? And I think
Mm.
that's the hardest thing for anyone to sort of to manage to do. And I think that is probably the conundrum with Renee Slegers. And a part of that, which we've discussed so much, is building a squad, not just the starting 11. I think a lot of that is coming from those key players in big moments, and that's great. That seeing a Blackstenius score in the Champions League epitomizes that. But the consistency of being able to do it every week, no matter who the opponent is how you change, how you're versatile, how you create options from the bench. And that's what we've been going on and on about. And despite such a positive result, I think that's where our focus has got to be. And we want to see progress. We want to see little things happening. And I worry that we're going to do it all in the summer and then expect to go into next season and just be like, yeah, we've done it all now. And we've got all these new players and we've let some go. And now we're just gonna, because it's always going to be transitional. If you do it like that, you're never going to sort of settle. So I think I'd much prefer to see little sort of progress here and there rather than sort of doing it all at once. And I think they've got themselves in a bit of a predicament that it was all happening sort of in this upcoming summer.
And I mean, it was there's some bad luck in the squad that Arsenal had available, but they had four players on their bench who were outfielders who played senior football for Arsenal. Chelsea brought on Kira Walsh, Lauren James, Sjoeke Nusken, Maggie Beaver-Jones, Johanna Rytting-Kaneryd. I mean, when I looked at the team sheet, I thought it confirmed what I already knew, that Arsenal were in trouble. I didn't see where the goals were coming from. There was no sort of attacking threat on the bench. Chelsea had loads. Like we spoke about last week, it was quite similar in terms of last season, where Chelsea's attacking threat on that day and who they are able to bring on off the bench decided the game. But Tim Stillman made the good point actually when you watch the men's team on Sunday, all of the attacking options, none of it really working. But I do think going back to the mentality, I think those players who started knew, what, actually there usually are these game changers that we can not rely on, but actually, it's more I might just play 60 minutes today. Most of them were on there playing, particularly in attacking areas, thinking this is on our shoulders today. There's no one who's going to come on and replace me. So I'm going to give my all. I'm going to work hard both areas, and I'm going to come up and like Beth Mead, turn up and score and assist. And then actually, when we do that, then you can change the defenders. Then we've got loads of defensive options to bring on. We can have six at the back or whatever we need. But it's quite an interesting contrast of actually the likes of Mead, Russo, Blackstenius, and Ford. I know Mead went off eventually, Palova came on, but they knew actually this was quite a nice opportunity for them to actually stamp their authority again and say, well, the people we're calling for in terms of Kelly and Smith, etc., aren't there. Let's show what we can still do.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at it, like you say, and the flip side is interesting because we don't often look at it from that way. And I think I never sort of doubt, and especially when you're in the crowd and you see sort of the connection that the players have with us and the celebrations and the moments that you get like that, and obviously winning things, you think, of course, the players want that. Like you can't understand why players don't show up in that way every single week, or you can't understand why they don't want to win all the time. They don't want that feeling, and you just question that. But there is the other side of the fact that, these players are human beings. They're playing every week, and our congested schedule that's now even more congested because we've got this tournament coming up and we're missing sort of WSL games for it. These players can play so much and give so much, and they will show up on the big occasion, but then to expect them to do it midweek and the weekend and not change that, I think that is the problem. It's not sort of a negative thing to maybe rotate players and then bring them back, or ask them to do different things. But going to the players on the pitch, like you say, I think we saw different things from different players. In the Chelsea game, I think Blackstenius stood out to me, and I don't know if many noticed that, but her she just played differently to how I've seen her play. We've seen so many times Russo up front, sorry, Blackstenius up front, Russo behind in the 10. We've complained about it. We've said it doesn't work and it nullifies Russo. And then I sort of saw less of that in this game. I kind of saw Blackstenius being involved more from getting back and actually winning the ball back and sort of out muscling and being stronger than some of these Chelsea players, sort of pushing them off the ball and things like that, which I don't see a lot from her in her game. So I wonder if Renee Slegers is sort of looking to get more out of these players that we haven't seen before, because I think going like if we said last I think we said last week about substitutions predictable, right? We bring on Caitlin Ford and Stina Blackstenius, we are getting from them. But actually, if Renee can get more from these players to do different things that we haven't seen them do, that's where you can use your players further, because you can't magic a whole bunch of players, and we're not going to do that. Even if we want to be able to buy lots of players, you can't do that overnight, but you can actually say, what are these strengths that we haven't seen of these players? And I think we saw that in the likes of Blackstenius, and Beth Mead as well. Actually, how can we utilise them differently to maybe what the opposition is expecting?
Just reminded me of my five-a-side team. One of our only wins this season came when we only had one sub, and that sub was me. I'm not saying I take any credit. I did assist the winning goal. We had another sub, but he was just one of our mates who came down to watch, and we said, "Look, put your Astros on, stand down there, and at least the other team will think that we've got our full quota of subs." And we actually won because we conserved our energy a little bit more from the start because we're all, unfit students, and we all thought there's more responsibility on us actually, and we really, you do work that bit harder. So funny how it changes. That is
Yeah.
a comparison no one wanted to hear, but it did, it did spring to my mind, But yeah, Blackstenius, I mean, if she could finish, goodness me, like she would get insane numbers. She would be up there with Shaw and Moore because every game she sort of ends up in two one-on-one situations with the goalie, and she's I think Hampton made one save, and I think she missed one where Bronze sort of covered her quite well. But I think we said it before, if you combined her and Russo, you'd have probably the best striker in the WSL. Because like you say, the all-round game, Kelly Smith said on the documentary, coming off the bench, no defender wants to face her. And and I fully believe that, but I think there is still that part of her when she goes one-on-one where I don't start typing, going Arsenal have
Mhm.
got a third. I just don't expect it to happen. And I think if she can get to that level, even though we know she's a big game player, and that might sound harsh, but she could score so many more goals. She creates these chances for herself. And it was just, I think there were a few players, I think Lotte Wood and Moy, Steph Catley, you could highlight the whole defense who just put their hand up and said, look, we know there's a big summer coming up, but this is what we can still do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's this idea of sort of versatility in a positive and negative light. I've been touching on it so much every time we play a game because I think you really see it differently every single week. And this, I guess, in the Chelsea game is the sort of the positive side of it. You look at Mariona Caldentey, we've been calling sort of all season to not have to play her so deep, to be able to play her in the what we think is her preferred position in the number 10. And then you see her doing positive things from a different position, and you sort of think, okay, well, that is the other side of it. She can still be involved in that. She can sort of play that role and play it well, and it is a positive problem to have. But also being able to see her maybe further f forward if we do get sort of the likes of Cooney Cross back or Marnham absent from that game, I think altered things as well. Maybe she would have played, and we wouldn't have seen Blackstenius and Russo because there's so many things that contribute to that. Olivia Smith getting a red card, you don't know if she would have played that game. More than likely she would have, and would that have changed the mindset of the likes of Caitlin Ford and Beth Mead, who I th thought both had very good games. And our fullbacks, possibly the best game from Katie McCabe and Emily Fox that
Mm.
I've seen. I mean, if Fox comes back into the side, she's straight back in it like she's never been away. And we're sort of really highlighting these players that we do rely on and we maybe do take for granted a little bit, but the likes of Catley and Fox and McCabe starting to become consistent, and that is what we need. And we need those players to step up. And that's not even mentioning Kim Little again having a great
Oh,
performance. And
phenomenal.
I mean, we could talk about Kim Little every single week, but
Yeah.
I don't think it would be enough because what she does consistently is just incredible.
It was just the little blocks, and I think Arsenal there were bodies on the line at the end, and the amount of times it'd just be a sort of scrum on the edge of the box, and Kim Little would just emerge with the ball, sort of coming out between everyone. But I completely agree with Caldente. The two goals she scores this season, one's at Bayern on the edge of the box, reminds us all of the Leon goal on the edge of the box last season, and then this one at Chelsea where she's in loads of space, but she's in the box. There's not been enough times this season where she's been in these situations. There's so much of this performance where we're going a little bit of this a little bit earlier would have been really good. So it's about building on that now, isn't it? But I mean, it's a massive boost. It looks like Kyra Cooney-Cross could be in the squad to play AS Far tomorrow. I mean, I really hope Arsenal can get into a position quite soon, by the Man City game, where they can go back to Cooney-Cross and Little in midfield. And Cooney Cross away for completely understandable reasons. And nice that Arsenal have really given her this time to say, actually, build back to full fitness, take your time. Um, but I mean, if they can get Caldente in the 10, because it was just starting to work, wasn't it, before Christmas? And that goal, my heart breaks a little bit every time she scores these goals because I just think we are deprived of that because she's playing in this deeper role. You forget how good she is in attacking situations.
Yeah, she really is one of our best players, and it always seems like Arsenal have these players every so often that come in. We know that they've got the ability because of their sort of previous history in the game and who they've played for. But I think maybe Mariona underrated at Barcelona, coming into this Arsenal side. I've seen even things back when she first signed of what she would actually do in the WSL. Was Arsenal sort of were Arsenal maybe making a mistake, or was she going to have an impact? And you just see last season, and I think she's really sort of coming into her role again. Maybe overly criticised this season for a lack of contribution or the lack of the role that she's played. But if you actually look at what she's been asked to do, and no one else is asked to do that, you only see the likes of maybe Kim Little able to do that and step up for the team, and to only be in your second season and to be able to do that, it's just incredible. But yeah, I mean, obviously Arsenal don't plan or predict for what happened with Cooney Cross and the absence. You can't predict that in football. It's beyond that, and like you say, loads of respect from the club and time for her, which is exactly what you would expect. And you don't know kind of when that return's going to be. So that's kind of a versatility and sort of that is understandable and makes sense and you can't really do anything about. But in terms of Mariona just as a player, I mean, I still think even if she doesn't contribute, people don't recognize, she seems to get the bonus points on fantasy every single week, and people are like, I wonder why. But if you look at her contribution, even without goals and assists, it kind of makes sense. I don't really think Arsenal will play a game without her. She seems to just be in the starting 11 every single week. I can't remember the last time we sort of played without her in there.
Yeah, she is so consistent, so important to this team. Before we move on to just wrapping up this game, Beth Mead, goal and an assist. It was, there are a lot of players in this team because this team has been together for a while who know how important it is to play Chelsea. And even Renee Slegers after said, this is my third game against Chelsea. And she said, I made a commitment to myself and how I want to go into these types of games. We know Chelsea away hurt her. She told me that at the reverse fixture this season, how she really took her time and fought after that game. I don't want this to happen again. I think it was a sign of, these players stepping up, going to Stamford Bridge. The first team to win there in the WSL is a nice stat. The fact that they might meet again in the Champions League, that's a nice marker now for Arsenal to lay down. The fact they've not actually lost to Chelsea this season, to go to Stamford Bridge and do it. But Beth Mead, I mean, talk to me about the celebrations in the away end, because she was, tapping the badge. It was just so loud. It was so loud in the away end, and just proper, unadulterated celebrations and joy. It was brilliant to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I mentioned sort of how the fan base works on a short-term memory. Midweek, you lose a game and maybe people would think, oh, you're going to come to Chelsea and be a little bit scared or a little bit quiet. Not at all. Got there for the pre-match meetup in the Wolf Pack, as I mentioned, which was sort of opening a little bit earlier for the Arsenal fans, and they've always been great at hosting the supporters club meetups. But the chants were coming out, ones that I haven't heard before, lots of jokes about the Champions League.
Mm.
But straight away the energy was there, and I just think that makes a huge difference because you go into it negative from the fans. I don't think we ever have really, but you go into it negative, and that sets sort of the vibe in general. But yeah, they were just incredible. The amount of people that showed up, being in there, and sort of not knowing what to expect from this Arsenal side every time you go to a game, but then getting that is just it makes it so much different when it's Chelsea. And I think that the Arsenal players don't celebrate as much. I mean, Mariona runs to the other side, which maybe you'd be like, Mariona, why can't you come over here? Because we don't get these moments often. But Beth Mead just, I think she epitomizes the club and she understands and like you say, she has the passion. I think she's a fan at the end of the day as well. So that's kind of what you want to see. Katie McCabe as well, who's always labelled online as a Chelsea fan. I'm not sure about that because she seems to absolutely love knee sliding across the entire pitch and yeah, friends and family of the players as well joining in, which you love to see. So it really is sort of the best kind of away days and definitely up there for this season. But hopefully more to come. And if we get that sort of match up in the Champions League, thinking ahead
Mm.
positively, I imagine it'll only be better because to me that is a bigger game.
Yeah, Beth Mead is just she's so much more effective on that right side, isn't she?
Yeah.
I was it the Leuven game, I think she was really impressive. I think Smith played on the left wing and Mead on the right, and she's just scoring Beth Mead goals this season. She sort of trademark goals, and that's why they play her on the right, because she's so powerful at driving in field, and she hits the ball hard. She takes her shots hard with her laces across Hannah Hampton. Emily Fox nearly scored one to be remembered as well. But yeah, Beth Mead is just continuing to remind people why she's so important to this Arsenal side. And, maybe she's one of those where we don't know what the future hold, but I've seen a couple of people say, well, do the players who know they're out of contract, are there any effort dropping off? And I'm just not, I mean, not knowing who is definitely leaving. I don't have 100% on anyone, but I couldn't think of anyone who I've looked at and thought they're not giving their all. And that's an important thing for Renee Slegers. And I think it's a sign of a manager who is still very much commands his dressing room, is very well respected, and some loyal players who are still giving their all. So good signs. A mention for Annika Borber as well, bounced back quite well from her mistake, clean sheet against Chelsea. Just on Chelsea's tactics, so many long range efforts. I mean, that must, in the away end, you must have thought, well, either they don't rate Annika Borber or, where's the strategy? Essentially, it must have been actually quite comforting because there were so many shots from range.
Yeah, I looked at the difference in stats because I couldn't quite fathom that we both had 18 shots in general. And then I looked at Chelsea's one shot on target out of 18. And I mean, if the attacking coaches and Bompasta are looking at that and thinking, that's a problem. It does feel very familiar, so we can't talk too much, but it does almost feel like Chelsea are sort of changing that combination a lot. We're not a Chelsea podcast. We won't go into the sort of ins and outs of the way that she sets up her team, but yeah, like you say, from an Arsenal perspective, it's nice to see that at times they look desperate, and I think we have looked like that at times, trying to get a sort of a winner or an equaliser or create a chance and not just being able to capitalise. But it's becoming quite familiar for Chelsea, which I know will worry them, but it sets up a really exciting WSL campaign. And what a great time for Chelsea to play City and then us to go and play City as well, because it's such a turning point in the season. And obviously, Manchester City are miles ahead, but it would be nice if this could end in an interesting way. Everyone sort of taking points off each other and not knowing. But yeah, a few warning signs maybe for Chelsea of sort of writing themselves out of the title race, but maybe
Mm.
using that sneakily to get back in and sort of scare Manchester City a little bit. It could be sort of a mind game thing or yeah, but there are some major problems for them and we'll just think about the fact that we got a great win and hopefully this is not just a one-off for us.
Bit gutted as well. I'm going to do the third place playoff, whether Arsenal are in it or not on Sunday. And the clashes with City Chelsea, which is such a shame. I'm going to have to get it and put my laptop in the press box because I don't really have to do any reporting on the non-Arsenal games. But I mean, if City win that, I think it's over. If Chelsea win 6 points, Chelsea have done it before, but yeah, it was just tactically outfought, and we've not said that enough about sort of what Renee Slegers has been able to do to teams this season. But a lot of criticism for Sonia Bonpastor, as you say, online, and I think just repeated errors in terms of in these big games, in these big moments, making the wrong decisions. And it seems Chelsea fans are a bit frustrated with that, and City have been able to capitalise well this season. Of course, Chelsea against City, and then Arsenal against City. In the next couple of weeks, and hopefully, they're interesting enough those games to spice up the league. Maybe, if Chelsea beat City, and then Chelsea fans will be hoping Arsenal do them a favour, which has happened in previous seasons. But all of that to come after the inaugural FIFA Women's Champions Cup. It's the sort of slimmed down version of the Club World Cup. That's going to happen once every 4 years. So we're going to get this every year. A bit controversial. Gotham and Corinthians are out of season. AS FAR and Arsenal are in season, so it's sort of half and half. Potentially in different years, it will go to a summer tournament. I'd like to see that, but of course, when you've got six different confederations competing, it means some teams will be in the rhythm, some teams won't be, and it looks like it's going to stay as a January tournament. The WSL have been quite critical of that because obviously January is a massive month in terms of women's football in the UK. We have all these different cup competitions and big league games always as well. What are your feelings like going into this tournament? I mean, FIFA aren't anyone's best of friends at the moment, of course, and I don't think the Club World Cup, well, it simply isn't on par with Champions Leagues and international tournaments. So I guess Arsenal's season really is not going to be defined by the next few days.
No, it really is sort of the unknown, and I don't, know how it's gonna. I was talking to you just before we jumped on the podcast about this. You don't really know what to expect. I'm going to both games, as in like I'm going tomorrow, and then I'm going on Sunday. Not sure sort of what to expect from it in terms of how engaged the fans are going to be, how engaged, the club have spoken so much about it. The promotion this week has been insane. It was even in Stamford
Loads.
Bridge, despite the
Yeah.
fact that they're not in the tournament. So I thought, handing leaflets out, free promo, this is the most FIFA thing ever, isn't it? Just get that everywhere. But it is nice to see them sort of try and promote it and not just sort of brush it under the carpet. I think it could be, like you say, great if Arsenal win it, maybe not too damaging if we don't. But the expectation is definitely on Arsenal. Looking at those four teams, I think if you can, you look at Arsenal as probably the top contender and the favourites to win it. But whoever they do end up playing is going to want to cause a major upset, and I think it would be huge for them to get through and to really challenge Arsenal. But I hope it's taken seriously, and I hope it might sort of not define the season, but give us a sort of a boost and maybe continue the momentum. But I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to see sort of how Arsenal set up. I hope they take it seriously. I want them to sort of put out a strong 11. I'm sure they will, but it is another 2 games into a congested schedule, so we'll see how that goes. We don't really have the options, to be honest, to change the entire team, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm hoping that this is sort of yeah, a big sort of game for Arsenal and hopefully 2 wins.
Yeah, my suspicion is a few changes tomorrow and then full strength, or as full strength as you can be. Believe Chloe Kelly is very much in contention. She's sort of been training as normal, is my understanding, which is good news. I wasn't at the presser earlier. There was no option to do it online, as FIFA sort of take control of the media activities. So luckily, Tim was down in Brentford. I'm not going to Brentford 2 days. I live in the North Hertfordshire. It's simply too far to go for a press conference. Frida Marnin back in contention. She headed a ball in training and came off. Well, the ball won the battle, so Frida Marnin missed the Chelsea game. Slightly too soon for Leah Williamson, he's tweeted. And then, as we touched on earlier, Cooney Cross with the squad, but a final decision will be made tomorrow on her. So, and of course, Olivia Smith back from her suspension. So Arsenal do have a few more options tomorrow. They named a 24-player squad. Leah Williamson and Chloe Kelly in there. Kyra Cooney Cross in there, of course, with the headlines. Sophie Harwood in there as well. I do believe she's going to be going out on loan. She signed a pro contract. We can maybe touch on that in a moment, but Arsenal do have those options. And I guess from the ticket sales perspective, they're probably hoping for an Arsenal Gotham final. I think, with respect to Corinthians and AS if either of them could cause an upset, then great for FIFA's perspective. But I think in terms of tickets and the attendance at that final, I think I'll personally be quite excited by an Arsenal Gotham final anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's probably some loyal Corinthians and AS4, fans that might be coming. I'm not really sure. To be honest, I was planning on reading on both teams because, like you say, this is interesting for teams we just don't see Arsenal play. And I think that is one of the things that stood out for me about this tournament. Arsenal play these familiar opponents every year. Doesn't matter what sort of point they are in competitions. You see them play Bristol City every year. I swear, getting them on the in the FA Cup, and then you've got these new teams that we don't really get to play very often. I remember obviously we played Washington Spirit in pre-season, and that was kind of the first glimpse we've had at a WSL and WSL clash that I've watched. So yeah, that would be an incredible final. But whoever Arsenal play, I think it's going to be great. It's going to be a good day out, and with it being at the Emirates, I think that obviously helps as well. Despite the fact that the neutrality is maybe lost a little bit, I don't know how opposing fans will think about that, but it's a great venue, and I'm hoping that brings the fans in and yeah, hopefully the club have done enough to advertise the game as well because that's where a lot of it comes from, I think, with WSL and Champions League and seen a lot in the past 24 hours. So maybe they're really pushing those ticket sales now as they've realised sort of going into these two games.
I'm seeing it everywhere, all over social media. I think they had a bit of a launch event yesterday of Olivia Smith down there. It's certainly, from a FIFA perspective, all very serious, all sort of being carried out as any other sort of major tournament would. And, I just struggle with a tournament every year. And I think we see it in the men's game in terms of, so is it Torquay? We have the World Cup every 2 years. And I just think you lose some of that shine. But I think for Arsenal, and Renee Slegers touched on this with Arsenal's history, I think for them to be the club in the inaugural one, if they can say, you know what, we've won the Champions League, and then the next year we won the inaugural, FIFA, I'm already forgetting what it's called.
Champions Cup,
FIFA
yeah.
Champions Cup, there you go, it's a good start. There's my accreditation gone. If they can beat the NWSL champions, for example, or Corinthians, and I really don't think AS4 will be a pushover either, because Morocco, as a country, a real force. The women's game, saw them at the last World Cup. They're actually putting a lot of investment in, and a number of their players play for AS4. They've won everything. I think they've won like the last 10 titles in Morocco. So, and it is the unknown, and that is exciting because I do think, like you say, we see it more in the men's game where we have these big pre-season tours and different matchups. Don't really get it as much in the women's. So maybe a nice chance to be tested in some different ways. And yeah, we'll see. But I just wonder I think the players will be up for it, and I mean, we're talking the Arsenal Gotham final into existence, and it won't happen now. But I think there's enough to get interested for. I'd say. But I just worry about maybe the crowds for the non-Arsenal games and what it'll be like as a spectacle, if you understand.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, like you say, it's the unknown now. But the first tournament happens, and then you sort of build from that, and hopefully that people see, that the players are interested in it. We saw the World Sevens tournament. I was there with when we was in at the Champions League in Lisbon and saw that, and I thought
Mm.
that was new and nobody knew anything about it, and it sort of became a different spectacle to what we'd ever expected with the celebrations and the way it was, and that was all the unknown at the time, and that was hugely successful. I think they've done it again since then. So these tournaments are coming about. We've talked about scheduling and issues with that, and what it means for the women's game and things like that from a negative perspective, and that's always worth mentioning. But looking at it from the other side, it's a new tournament. It's exciting. We're in it now, and yeah, we'll see what the celebrations are like as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to heading down to and a new stadium. We always love talking
Yes.
about going to a new stadium, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, likewise. I like that area of London.
Hmm.
Actually, Brentford. Brentford. I've been past that stadium in the car before. I'm a fan of sort of Richmond, Kew Gardens down that way. Would love to live down there, but I can only go down on the train. But yeah, it's a nice ground. It's a new ground, as you say. And it is one off the top of my head that's sort of been talked about as an alternative venue for Arsenal. Now, I don't want to say this as any sort of official thing, but I feel like when the Bayern Munich game was moved to Meadow Park, Brentford was mentioned. And now I don't know how serious any conversations were, and I may just be speculating, but the fact that it is there, I think there's clearly a good relationship between them and Arsenal. So maybe, a nice chance to see sort of how many fans will go because, it is that different area of London. But yeah, hopefully we'll see some drama. And I am looking forward to some double headers. Anyway, so yeah, Daisy, hopefully see you there, and we will reconvene next week and to look back on the Champions Cup and look ahead to Arsenal against Manchester City.